Send him right in. Come on in, Miles.
Your secretary left word in my service that you want to see me?
Yes. How you feeling?
Okay, I guess.
Sit down. I got something very important I want to talk to you about.
It's about that theory you came up with last night.
It's the laboratory's chemical report on the water that was in your cooler.
What'd they find?
There's no doubt about it. It's been laced with a very unhealthy dose of amphetamines.
Each time I took a drink of water?
You were plunging yourself deeper and deeper into a drug-induced state.
I thought I was losing my mind.
It was the garbage in your system making you act that way. But you're gonna be all right now, Miles.
God.
I know you've been through an awful lot, but it's over now. You start putting the pieces back together again.
Can I? When I think of the way I've been acting, the way I treated everybody, the way I behaved, the accusations I made.
No, that wasn't you talking, those were the drugs.
Is it that simple? How am I going to be able to make it up to Nicole? How?
Those amphetamines didn't just simply materialize in your water cooler.
You really think it was Nola's doing?
Well, you know she was feeding barbiturates to Deborah. Why not do the same thing to you?
Except with just a different kind of treat, huh?
Now, you told me when she was in your office you left her to answer the phone call in the other room. That would have given her plenty of time to tamper with your water cooler.
Well, it's tap water for me from now on.
Miles, all the pieces fit. You've got Benny Hayes' book. It shows that he sold Nola Madison, alias Martha Corey, an incredible amount of barbiturates and amphetamines just a day before she met with you.
She used the barbiturates on Deborah and the amphetamines on me.
Oh, I know she has an axe to grind against Deborah, but what's she have against you?
Well, I was threatening to expose her.
That's a pretty extreme way of keeping a secret.
Well, she's trying to discredit me, you know, acting the way I was. If I accused her of anything, who's going to believe it?
You're going to press charges.
I don't know.
Don't tell me you're going to be a bleeding heart, too.
What do you mean?
Deborah's reluctant to press charges. She says the damage has already been done. Make a big deal about this now would just to ruin a lot of people's lives.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will give it some thought. Right now, I want to just concentrate on trying to get accumulation of this drug out of my system.
Of course.
It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast. I know that amphetamine has a residual effect. I will probably have to go through some kind of withdrawal.
Anything I can do to help?
No, you've done your part.
You really ought to give Nicole a call. You know, she deserves an explanation.
You mean you haven't told her? I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity for the two of you to get together.
Miles?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have any right to say that. I realize that. I guess it's going to be a while before I can get back to my old self.
I didn't say anything to Nicole because I figured she'd want to hear the good news from her husband. And the sooner the better.
You're right. You're right. All right. Look, thank you very much.
Sure.
That's what I'm going to do. Right now.
And they lived happily ever after.
You know, it's funny you should ask. If you had called about 2 minutes earlier, the line would have been busy. I was on the phone with Draper.
What did he have to say?
Oh, hello, how are you? That kind of thing.
That's nice.
Ordinary, if you ask me.
Come on, what's wrong with ordinary?
Well, I just don't know how he does it.
Does what?
Manages to act as if nothing has happened.
Well, it's better than sitting around at home and feeling sorry for himself, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. But the fact is, something has happened, and to talk to Draper on the phone, you'd have absolutely no idea that he's just been indicted for murder.
Well, he's probably spending the better part of his day with Mike, preparing his defense.
Yeah. Well, they better hurry, because Logan has promised to try to move this trial up very quickly. And frankly, It scares me.
It's going to be an ordeal for all of us.
Yeah, but I guess it's much better to do it quickly. The quicker the trial, the quicker Draper's exonerated, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, well, I don't even want to think about the alternative.
Well, then don't.
Don't dwell on the negative. Draper has the best possible defense. He's innocent.
Oh, I know that, and you know that. Now all we have to do is convince a jury of that. Oh, that's the door. Listen, I think it's Deborah. Can I call you back later on?
Sure.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Coming! Hello! Hi! Glad I am to have a little company. Ever since the doctor told me to stay home and relax, I've been going crazy. You got it, huh?
Yeah, oh, yes, I got it. I tell you. Oh, ice cream in the middle of winter.
I can't help it. I get cravings, you know. Tea's here.
Oh, great. Here, let me do the honors. Oh! And I thought...
Looks delicious.
Pickles. Well, you know, pickles, ice
here
cream.
you go.
Get some tea.
Deborah, I know this is a social visit, but, well, I can't help but ask. Did the police have any news on Draper's case?
No, not a thing.
No new information at all?
Not about Draper. You want to talk about Elliot, Dorn?
Have the police finally connected Elliot with Margot's murder?
Oh, I have been trying, April.
Which means they haven't. Look, Deborah, I didn't turn the police on to Elliot just to divert attention from Draper. Elliot had a very strong motive for wanting Margot dead.
Nobody is questioning that Elliot had a strong motive.
Well, then I'm a little confused. I mean, I've read in the papers that the police are running a very thorough investigation, and if that's so, then I have to assume that Elliot is being found innocent, or else they wouldn't have indicted Draper.
Wait a minute. Now, we'll give Elliot a gold star for motive. But in order to consider him a viable suspect, we have got to show opportunity.
Yeah.
We have absolutely no evidence to suggest that he was anywhere near the Dorn apartment.
Oh, come on, Deborah. There's got to be evidence.
We can't prove it.
So what you're telling me then is that Elliot's alibi checked out?
No, I'm not saying that either.
Well, then what are you saying? I'm very confused.
Elliot has given me another alibi.
What?
Yes. The night that Margot was attacked, he says he was with a young lady.
Oh. I see. Well, that could very probably be true, since it happens to be Elliot's favorite pastime.
Yes, but he is refusing to give me any details, such as the woman's name, since she's married.
What right does he have to withhold that kind of information?
Well, look, the grand jury did not indict Elliot for Margot's murder. They got Draper. And if the evidence against Draper hadn't been so strong, we never would have let Elliot get away.
Look, I don't care what the grand jury has to say. I see absolutely no reason in the world why Elliot shouldn't be made to produce this mysterious girlfriend. Deborah, all he has to lose is a couple of lady friends, and Draper has his freedom.
Believe me, I agree with you completely. But the problem is, Elliot is not under indictment. We have absolutely no way to make him tell us the truth. Don't you see?
No. No, all I see is that the wrong person is going on trial. The wrong person may go to prison. Don't you see how awful this is? Not only is the person who killed my mother getting away with it, my own husband is paying the price.
I understand, believe me. I'm sorry, I didn't come over here to upset you.
No, I'm sorry. Look, I have no right to take all this out on you. It's just that I'm very tense. It's good.
You know what I'm gonna do?
What?
I'm gonna go see Elliot right now. He doesn't have to know that he can be silent about this. I'm gonna tell him that unless he comes up with that name, I am gonna reopen this investigation.
It's open. It's open!
Heard you want to see me, boss?
Yeah, about 20 minutes ago. Did you come by way of the secretarial pool?
Well, how'd you guess? Can I help it if every time I walk in that room I make a big splash? I thought that was pretty good. Pool, splash. Oh, there's the one about the traveling lawyer. See, he goes to a
The
farmhouse.
reason I asked you in here is because I have some official information which I wish to convey to you.
Ah, you've decided to marry a coroner. You're going to abdicate and leave all this to me.
I've decided who's going to head the prosecution team in the Scott case. Congratulations.
You mean me?
I guess I do. You're the only other person in the room.
I knew it.
Now, what is the matter? Whenever there's an important case come up, you're always in here whining for the job. I just thought I'd spare myself the sideshow and let you have it.
Oh, sure, sure.
Look, I have to disqualify myself. You know that. I'm Draper's friend.
Well, look, I hate to disappoint you, boss, but I just can't take this case.
You seem less overwhelmed than I thought you'd be.
Well, I was looking forward to my 2-week vacation. You know, my good buddy Steve Guthrie's out in California.
If you are available, and much as I hate to add to that inflated ego of yours, you're the best ADA I've got. I want you in that courtroom.
Oh, please, boss, do me a favor. Give this assignment to somebody else.
You told me this thing was open and shut. It's not like you to pass up a sure conviction.
Well, it is. Hey, I could win this case with my tongue tied behind my back. This is no test for my legal expertise. You know, you ought to give this to one of the junior guys who need the experience.
You'd give up the chance to have your name in the papers every day?
Look, I told you, boss, I don't want this job.
I didn't ask you if you did.
This is a no-win situation. If I lose this case, I look like a legal idiot. If I win this case, I'll lose every friend I have in town.
Oh, not to worry. You weren't in any danger of winning a popularity contest.
Well, maybe, but at least I could walk down the street. I mean, without having old ladies and little kids point to me and say, there goes the mean man that sent that sweet, kind, lovable Draper Scott off to prison, leaving his wife alone and pregnant. Come on, boss. I always saw me as the leading man. Don't make me play the heavy.
I know how you feel. I may have to grow a beard myself.
Well, now you understand.
Look, like it or not, Draper's gone and gotten himself indicted. That means it's our job to see that he gets a fair
It's
trial.
your job. You're the DA. You have the big leather chair.
I am the DA. I make the assignments, and this one sticks. This is your job.
You want me to do your dirty work.
Right. I'm glad you understand. Well, since we've gotten that straight, I guess we might as well get started. Here's the file, your copy of the indictment, and a yellow pad. Make like a lawyer.
And would be staying with them till a scheduled Monday appearance in federal court. Deal with that. Miles.
Hi. I'm not interrupting anything, am I?
No, come in. I was just finishing up some stuff for the news tonight.
I had to talk to you. It's important. I got some incredible news today, and I thought you ought to know about it.
About what?
About my behavior. I think I can explain to you why I've been acting the way I have.
You can?
Nicole, I've been on drugs.
What?
True. For the last month, I have been tripping out on amphetamine.
But you've never taken anything stronger than aspirin. How?
Involuntarily. I didn't know I was taking it.
Just don't
Listen,
understand.
Derek came to my office yesterday. He wanted some information about reactions to barbiturates and amphetamines, and it was related to a case of his. And I was describing the effects of amphetamine overdose to him, and all of a sudden he realized that I was describing my own behavior to a T. Nicole, it turns out that Nola Madison dumped enough amphetamine in my water cooler to keep me speeding all the way to a mental institution, quite literally.
Nola Madison?
Yeah, it's a long story.
Well, tell me.
No, in time. In time. Right now, all you have to know is that every time I drank a glass of water, I was ingesting more and more of the drug, until finally, well, you know, I was beginning to display paranoid tendencies, and
This means that the way you've been acting has nothing to do with any sort of inherited mental disorder?
no, thank God.
That's wonderful.
You ever forgive me for the way I've treated you?
No, you didn't mean to hurt me. There's nothing to forgive you for.
I love you. I love you.
I was so afraid of losing you.
I was afraid I was going to lose you, too.
Does this mean that you don't have to go away? Welcome home.
Well, I'm not home for good. At least not yet.
Why?
Because there's an awful lot of the drug still left in my system.
What does that mean?
It just means that I'm under its influence still, and while I am, I really can't trust myself to be around you.
Oh, yeah, but now we know what the problem is. I can help you, and if you have an outburst,
I just don't know if I'll be able to control my temper, that's all.
I want to take care of you. Don't leave.
I promise you, as soon as I feel my system is all clear, I will be back. I swear it. You're not going to be able to keep me away.
You hurry back, okay?
You called and asked if you could come over. I should have said no.
Mrs. Madison, I am here on official business.
This is pure harassment. Plain and simple.
It does appear as if you're sifting the ashes of a very cold fire, Deborah.
A man's freedom is at stake, Elliot. I would like to double-check some information.
You've already arrested the guilty party. His trial is imminent. What's the point of all of this, if not simply to intrude on our privacy?
Mrs. Madison, I will be as brief as possible. I need to speak to Elliot.
I'm right here.
Alone. Mrs. Madison, if you'll excuse us, please.
Look, I don't appreciate being ordered about in my own home.
That's okay, darling. I'll take care of this. Well, Deborah, what can I help you with?
Won't wash, Elliot.
What are you talking about?
I am talking about this little deal you insisted upon. Not making a statement about the woman you were with the night your wife was murdered. I have got to have her name.
Deborah, you said you realized the need for utmost discretion. The lady is married.
Yes, I intend to abide by that. I just need to know her name. Nobody else has to know.
What if I refuse?
That's your choice. You can give me the girl's name. I can check it out quietly. Or else your statement, as it is, goes public.
That is a threat, isn't it?
Your cooperation would be appreciated, Elliot. But with or without it, I will get to the truth.
Please, Deborah, don't place me in this kind of situation. Nola must never know about this other woman. It would hurt her very much. Terribly.
I'm touched by your concern for my feelings, darling. But I don't want you to obstruct justice.
How long have you been there, Nola?
Go ahead, Elliot. Let's hear the name of the woman.
Okay, you want to know the truth. I'll tell you the truth. I lied.
What do you mean?
There was no woman.
Then why that tale, Elliot?
Well, I thought my alibi was insufficient, as you've told me many times, and I thought it would be better to invent something that the police could believe in.
Oh, I see. Well, considering your past, I guess it was plausible.
Well, so I'm innocent on both counts. Of murder and of infidelity to my fiancée.
So what were you doing that night, Elliot?
I was alone, as I said I was.
Meaning you have a totally unsupported alibi for the time your wife was murdered.
Well, Deborah, I could tell you I was ice fishing in Monticello River, if that would satisfy you.
Makes the second time you've lied to me, Elliot. You know, someone could get the idea that you've got something to hide.
Look, Deborah, you have the killer. You have enough incriminating evidence against that man to send him away for a very long time. What does it matter where I was?
I think Chief Mallory would be interested in this new development. Could shed a few more lights on the case.
I think you're wasting your time.
We'll see what Chief Mallory has to say about this. I'll be in touch with you. Oh, and Elliot, until you hear from me, don't make any plans to go out of town.
You really told her, darling.
I told her the truth.
Really?
Now, come on, my precious. I mean, surely you don't believe I would carry on behind your back? I mean, I would have no reason to. I'm engaged to the most desirable woman in Monticello. I haven't as much as looked at another woman since the moment we met.
I'd still like to know exactly where you were that night.
Are you subjecting me to a third degree?
Look, I'm worried, Elliot. I can't help it.
But I swear to you, faithful.
It's something else.
Okay, what other evil deeds are you accusing me of?
When Lillian was getting your clothes ready for the cleaners, she found this in the pocket of your trousers.
So?
Well, it says 123 Rivershore. That's Margot's address, isn't it?
Well, I did live there, you know.
Yeah. Well, you told me you gave Margot her keys back when you moved out.
Oh, but these must have slipped my mind.
No, but this means you still had access to the apartment, Elliot. You could have used these keys to walk in there at any time.
All rise. The Criminal Court of the County of Monticello is now in session. The Honorable Martin Oliveri presiding. Be seated.
Is the prosecution ready?
We are, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready?
The defense is ready, Your Honor.
Very well. The prosecution may open to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'd like to thank you, too, for being here. That seems funny to you? I know. According to our jury system, everyone thinks that you were required to be here, but that's not really true. I mean, if you would have expressed some prejudice against this case, you would have been dismissed, and you would have been spared the difficult task which lies before you. But none of you expressed that prejudice. All of you said that you would be willing to decide the innocence or guilt of Draper Scott, the defendant, despite the fact that you knew that your verdict might send a man of good reputation, a father soon, and a husband, away from his home and family and from the friends that he knows, from the career that he's made for himself, from the life that he knows. Now, that's a great responsibility. All of you knew that that might be the most difficult decision you've ever had to make in your life. And yet, you said that you would be willing to make that decision if, when you're shown the facts, you felt beyond a reasonable doubt that Draper Scott, in a moment of uncontrolled anger, seized the nearest weapon at hand and bludgeoned to death Margot Huntington Dorn, the mother of his wife. Now, if you believe this to be true after I show you the facts, that Draper Scott did commit this murder, then you're required by law to say that you believe that. And that's all. Now, the difficult task of deciding punishment falls on the shoulders of Judge Oliveri, not you. All the prosecution asks of you is that you listen to the evidence with an open mind, that you hear the testimony of the witnesses we bring before you, and that you decide this case on the basis of the facts, not the personalities involved. Now, if you do this, we feel you'll be able to reach this difficult decision without fear of making a mistake. Now, these are the facts of the case. On the night of January 25th, Draper Scott telephoned his mother-in-law, Margot Huntington Dorn, at her home at 123 Rivershore Drive from his home in Oakdale, a suburb of Monticello. He had just returned from New York. He was angered over the fact that Mrs. Dorn had had some apparent interference in his career as an attorney. That interference we'll outline for you later. Now, he asked Mrs. Dorn if he could meet with her. She said she would do this in an hour's time because she had some errand to run. Mr. Scott then left his house, went to Mrs. Dorn's apartment building, arriving at 7:45 by his own admission. He then parked his car in front of the apartment building and waited for Mrs. Dorn to return. And when he saw her enter the building, he followed her in, just missing her elevator by a minute or two. Now, the doorman said that he could go right up, that she was expecting him without being announced. This Mr. Scott did. Within 10 minutes, Draper Scott was on the telephone to the police emergency services asking for an ambulance. And when the police and the paramedics arrived, they discovered Mrs. Dorn gravely injured from a blow to the head administered by a piece of fireplace equipment found beside her. There was no one else in the apartment. That is by Mr. Scott's own statement. And because the service elevator was locked, the only entrance or exit to that apartment was through the one private elevator which ascends directly to the penthouse only. Now, we would like you to weigh these facts carefully and to judge these facts objectively and make your decision on the basis of these facts alone and not the personalities involved. And if you do that, we see only one logical, rational verdict. Thank you. That was fabulous. That was just the right amount of diplomatic restraint, huh? Pretty good.
Mr. Carr, you may open to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecuting attorney has correctly stated that the most important ingredient in this case, as in every trial, is fact. We, too, will deal only in the known facts when we present our case for the defense. But there are circumstances surrounding the death of Margot Dorn which are still clouded in mystery. There are questions that we cannot answer any more than the police investigation was able to answer them. But we intend to prove that Draper Scott, an intelligent, compassionate, civilized young man, did not suddenly revert to savagery because he was upset with his wife's mother, that he did not lose every ounce of the common sense and decency with which he was blessed all his life, to the point of a brutal attack on a helpless woman. Of course, it is true that even gentle, mild-mannered, so-called decent men and women have been driven to acts of violence, and I'm sure the prosecution will point that out to you. But these examples of reversion to the beast do not indicate that a similar transformation took place in the heart and mind of Draper Scott. Despite the circumstantial evidence the prosecution will present to you, we will convince you that Draper Scott did not commit this crime. And the witness who will prove that to your satisfaction is Draper Scott himself. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, are you ready to call your first witness?
Sir, we are. The prosecution would like to call Sergeant Samuel Dwyer.
Sergeant Samuel Dwyer, please take the stand. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand.
Who is that man?
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth,
Police
and nothing
officer?
but the truth, so help you God?
How do we know him?
State your name. Sam Dwyer.
Frankly, I don't. Looks very familiar to me.
Sergeant Dwyer, what's your occupation?
I'm connected with the Monticello Police Department, plainclothes squad.
Yes, how many years?
8 years, first 5 in uniform.
Where were you on the night of January 25th?
I was at 123 Rivershore Drive questioning one of the tenants about a missing persons case. Turned out to be the wrong party.
Well, then how did you get involved with the crime in the penthouse?
Well, just as I was leaving the building, the paramedics arrived, and I thought I'd better check it out.
And when you entered the penthouse, what did you see?
2 people. A woman lying on the floor in front of the terrace, and a young man.
Nobody else?
Nobody else. Just the lady and Mr. Scott.
Nicole, I feel faint. Are you sure you're all right?
I never met the lady.
Maybe you
but I
shouldn't
had
stay
heard of
here.
her.
What about the defendant, Draper Scott?
Oh, I've seen Mr. Scott around police headquarters on and off, and once in the district attorney's office, Mr. Swift's office.
Yes. Were you aware of the fact that the defendant, Draper Scott, was a son-in-law of Mrs. Dorn?
I don't guess I knew that at the time, but I found it out during questioning.
I see. Could you please tell us what you did right after you saw the body on the floor and Mr. Scott over it?
Well, the first thing I did was call police headquarters and let them know what had happened. Then I made another telephone call.
Oh, to whom?
To another police officer, Detective Steve Guthrie.
Why did you call Detective Guthrie?
Well, Mr. Scott mentioned his name, said he was a friend of his, and I thought Mr. Scott could use a friend.
So then the defendant was very shaken up, obviously upset.
Yes, he was in pretty bad shape, white as a ghost.
But not completely white. Well, you stated in your statement that his hands were dirty.
That's not something I noticed.
Yes, of course. That was Detective Guthrie who noticed that. It was
Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is introducing evidence not verified by this witness.
Your Honor, I would gladly produce Detective Guthrie, but the defense knows as well as I do that Detective Guthrie is out of the state on police business. However, he did issue a statement, and this witness will confirm it.
Objection overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. In that statement, he says that the defendant Draper Scott's right hand was covered with fireplace soot. Isn't that correct?
Well, Mr. Scott said that he had picked up another fireplace tool when he thought he heard someone on the terrace.
Sergeant Dwyer, that is not the question that I asked you.
That's what he said, just the same.
Yes, of course. Let's proceed to the question of the weapon, all right? There was a weapon.
Yes, there was a fireplace tool on the floor right next to Mrs. Dorn's body.
Are you sure that that was the murder weapon?
No doubt about it. There was blood on it. But no fingerprints.
Yes. Well, I'm sure that someone of your police expertise would agree that an instrument like this could have the fingerprints wiped off quite easily. Don't you think?
I guess so.
Is this the murder weapon?
Yes, it's got my mark on it.
I don't know, so it does. Well, Your Honor, we'd like to admit this into evidence. Exhibit A.
We have no objection, Your Honor.
The evidence will be so marked.
Sergeant, did Mr. Scott volunteer any information to you as to how this affair occurred? Any explanation as to what happened?
No, he didn't seem to have any idea. He seemed pretty much out of it.
So the defendant was upset. He was not in control of what he was doing or saying, correct?
What I mean is that, he was in a state of shock. He didn't know what had happened. He didn't know how anybody could have done this to his
Sergeant,
mother-in-law,
please,
especially
just
since
answer
they
the
had come
questions
up
that
a
I
minute.
direct to you, please.
I thought that's what I was doing.
Yes, of course you did. No more questions.
Sergeant Dwyer, on direct examination, you testified that there were no fingerprints on the murder weapon.
That's correct.
Now, the prosecution has implied that Mr. Scott wiped his prints off that murder weapon. Given your long years of experience on the police force, Sergeant, if Mr. Scott had wiped his prints off that murder weapon, wouldn't it have been logical for him to also have wiped the soot off his hands at the same time?
I suppose so.
Did Mr. Scott tell you or Detective Guthrie why his hands were covered with soot?
Well, he did say that he had picked up another fireplace tool when he thought he heard someone on the terrace. And he said when he got out there, he found a plant that had fallen over.
Ah. What were the weather conditions like on the night of January 25th? Do you recall?
Yes, it was quite windy and very cold.
So the wind could have knocked over that plant, creating the noise that Mr. Scott heard.
Yes, that's a very great possibility.
Considering the fact that he had just discovered the body of a woman who had obviously been attacked by someone, hearing a noise, realizing that he might have been in danger himself, wouldn't it have been logical for him to pick up something to protect himself?
Your Honor, I object. Mr. Dwyer, or Sergeant Dwyer, was not there at the time. Mr. Carr is just asking for an opinion, not fact.
Sustained.
I have no more questions, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
The witness may step down. The prosecution may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Oscar Miller.
Oscar Miller, please take the stand. Please Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I certainly do.
State your name.
Oscar Miller.
Be seated.
Mr. Miller, what's your occupation?
Head doorman.
How many doormen are there at 123 Rivershore Drive?
There are 4 of us on my side of the building, sir. 3 8-hour shifts and 1 relief man, in case one of us gets sick.
Yes. On the night of January 25th, what shift were you working?
The night shift. I generally work nights. It pays a little more.
How long have you worked at the building?
Oh, ever since the place opened about 3.5, 4 years ago.
Well, then you know everyone. Your job is to admit people upstairs and to be in charge of the security.
That's right.
Now, is it true that there are 3 passenger elevators on your side?
Yes, sir. 2 for all the tenants on the floors below the penthouse, and 1 private elevator that goes up to the penthouse only.
So the penthouse elevator went straight up to Mrs. Dorn's apartment without stopping on any floors.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there are 2 service elevators, but they are always locked up tight after 6 p.m.
You mean that on the night in question, the only way for Mrs. Dorn or any other visitor to get into that apartment was via this elevator?
Yes, sir. There only was 1 visitor,
Go ahead.
Mr. Scott. Look, I don't want to do this. I really like Mr. Scott. And I don't...
Your Honor. Sustained. Mr. Miller, please do not volunteer. Just answer the questions put to you by these attorneys.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Mr. Miller, if it's any consolation, none of us really want to do this, but we have to. Now, will you please tell me what time you saw Mrs. Dorn enter the building?
Well, I didn't look at my watch or anything, but I'm pretty sure it was just about 5 minutes before 8.
And Mr. Scott?
Oh, not 1 minute after. Maybe 2.
Yes.
At the most.
Could you please tell me what Mrs. Dorn said to you?
She said, Oscar, I'm expecting my son-in-law at any moment. Just send him right up.
And when Mr. Scott arrived, you sent him right up?
Right up, that's right.
Did you notice anything unusual about his demeanor?
Well, he, was wearing a dark overcoat, no hat.
No, Mr. Miller, no. Not his appearance. I meant his attitude or his manner.
Oh, yes, oh, yeah, he looked real angry. I remember I said to Dennis, I said, he's the new doorman, he was just leaving to go home. I said, hey, did you see that one? That's the penthouse son-in-law. Didn't he look like the wrath of God? That's just what I said.
The wrath of God. Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Mr. Carr?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Miller, during your direct examination, the word security was mentioned. The fact is, you are not a security guard, are you?
No, sir. I'm a doorman. The head doorman.
And in fact, your duties do not require you to screen anyone who comes into that building, take their names, or even note the time of their arrival.
No, sir, all I gotta do is announce them.
Are you absolutely certain that only 1 or 2 minutes passed between the time that Margot Dorn arrived and Draper Scott followed?
Maybe even less time than that.
Are you a good judge of elapsed time, Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir, I think I am.
You realize that it's rather difficult for people to tell exactly how much time has passed between events.
I don't have any doubt about it. The elevator door was practically just closed when Mr. Scott came in, breathing fire like a dragon.
Mr. Miller, I did not ask you about Mr. Scott's demeanor.
No, sir.
Mr. Miller.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Miller, could you tell me how much time you think has elapsed between the time I've started this examination?
Pardon?
How long do you estimate I've been standing here talking to you?
Well, I guess I could estimate that. I'd say a couple minutes. No, make it 3 or 4.
3 or 4 minutes. You'll have to take my word for this, Mr. Miller, but I began this stopwatch when I began cross-examining you. As you can see, only about 1 minute has passed. That's all.
Well, it sure seemed longer to me. Maybe that's because I'm, a little nervous.
Yes, I can understand why you would be, Mr. Miller. Yeah. No more questions, Your Honor.
Witness may step down. Please call your next witness, Mr. Nelson.
Certainly, Your Honor. Prosecution would like to call Dr. Bruce Corwin.
Dr. Bruce Corwin to the stand.
Excuse me.
Why do they have to call him? Isn't he the doctor that was taking care of Mark? Yes.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Dr. Corwin, can you describe the injury to Margot Dorn?
It was a skull fracture.
Was death instantaneous?
No, it wasn't. Perhaps the blow was slightly glancing or didn't have tremendous force behind it. However, there was a very great deal of intracranial pressure, which we were unable to relieve. And death followed approximately 48 hours later.
Did she ever recover consciousness?
Actually, there was a very brief period of consciousness, highly unusual in such cases. I would say that Mrs. Dorn had a great will to live.
Well, during these brief periods of consciousness, did she speak?
She made a few incoherent sounds.
But wasn't there one time when the sounds she made were quite clearly coherent?
There was a moment when she made an audible sound, which I suppose you could call speech.
When was this?
It was during a visit from her daughter. Her daughter was constantly at her bedside, so visit may not be the appropriate word.
Was anyone else there at the time?
Yes, I was there.
All right, then, Doctor, you please tell the jury exactly what April Scott asked her mother and what her mother replied.
Objection, Your Honor. Instead of hearsay evidence, why doesn't Mr. Nelson question the party directly involved?
Your Honor, the doctor stated that he was there. How much more directly involved can you be?
I'll deny the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Go ahead, Doctor. What did April Scott say?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
I said, what did April Scott say?
She desperately wanted her mother to speak, to say something, something that would exonerate her husband.
That seems only natural. Can you remember the exact way that she phrased the question, carefully?
She said, "Tell them Draper is innocent."
Draper is innocent. Now, what was the answer?
Mrs. Dorn
Dr.
said...
Corey, please speak up for the jury.
Yes, I'm sorry. Mrs. Dorn said, no.
Draper is innocent, and the answer was no. Is that correct?
Yes. Mrs. Dorn said, no.